A district commander with only 52 mental force. Mr. Blonde must have seen something in you, but what was it?
Zhao's voice flit through the air, and in an instant, she appeared right next to me. She'd drawn her sword with her left hand. In an easy and light move, the blade swiped down at me. I quickly sidestepped, dodging the sword. As I grabbed my bow with my left hand, I pulled out an arrow and aimed at Zhao's left eye. Without the slightest hesitation, I fired. Zhao didn't move to avoid it, and the arrow flew straight into her left eye. My arrows are all coated with a pain-stimulating drug that causes the recipient to feel 100 times more pain than they ordinarily would, and the arrow even struck her in the eye, but Zhao didn't appear to feel any pain. An arrow stuck out from her left eye with fresh blood flowing down, but she didn't make a single movement. She just stared back at me. Then the sword she wielded came down in an arc towards me. Once again, I sidestepped her attack. Then I glanced over at Nizun. He hadn't moved from the spot he'd been standing at, and instead of looking at me, his eyes were fixed on Zhao. Muscle Man and Bandages had moved to either side of Nizun, seemingly waiting for a command. Zhao pulled out the arrow in her eye. I saw what appeared to be the lens of her eye being pulled out as well. As she pulled out the arrow, her eye quickly healed over. The entire time, Zhao had shown no sign of hesitation and her actions had been carried out smoothly. I grabbed another arrow and, again, aimed at her left eye. As I aimed, she raised her sword in preparation to attack again, when suddenly, a light chuckle sounded from nearby.
That's all your skill amounts to, and you want me to work for you.
Everyone on the scene turned towards the source of the voice. The person had likely been hiding in the forest the entire time, somewhere outside of our field of vision. A figure slowly walked out from a dark crevice. As I watched him appear in front of us, my grip on my bow weakened. Zhao seemed even more startled than me. Her already wide eyes somehow grew even wider. He looked to be about the same age as Nizun and myself. His hair was dark brown and medium length, and he wore a white shirt and black jeans with a pair of clashing bright yellow sneakers. His eyes were the same color as his hair, and he looked completely ordinary in every way, just like someone from the real world. The only thing out of place was the thin and flexible sword at his waist. I've seen such flexible weapons before, and they're even harder to wield than a whip. Very few people used it. When I saw his face and those brown eyes, I couldn't help trembling. But the man didn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on Zhao. Bandages had walked over beside the man, and he suddenly said,
Gao Shin, our commander has sent 3 ranked B officers to find you. What are you doing here?
Oh, so you're the ones who sent those 3 stalkers. Sorry, I got rid of them.
A strange smile appeared on Goshin's lips, his dark brown eyes glimmering. Now, unsteady, I staggered backwards. My unusual behavior must have caught his attention because suddenly, he looked right at me. When his brown eyes landed on me, I couldn't help but drop my bow to the ground. I grabbed my head with both hands and violently shook my head. No, how could he be here? He saw my panicked reaction and surprise flashed across his eyes. Then he asked,
Have we met before?
I stepped back, and then I felt Nizun behind me. He supported me up with his right hand, and grabbed the bow that I'd dropped with his left. I didn't turn back to look at him. I just borrowed his strength and leaned against him. Gao Yi, how could you be here? Tears nearly streamed out of my eyes.
Oh, I'm sorry. My surname is indeed Gao, but my name is not Gao Yi. I am Gao Shin.
He smiled at me, his eyes resplendent. I couldn't understand what I was seeing. The person standing in front of me now, the one who called himself Gao Shin, was the person I'd had a crush on, the person I'd unintentionally killed. I couldn't be mistaken. His hair and his eyes were a natural but unordinary kind of brown. His pupils were slightly larger than others, and they gave off an enchanting kind of light. Moreover, he always wore a white shirt with black jeans and a pair of yellow sneakers. I remember always teasing him about the odd pairing. A grown man wearing bright yellow shoes, and with a white shirt and black jeans like that. Zhao's voice suddenly sounded.
No matter who you've mistaken him for, you're wrong. He's been in the split zone for longer than twice the time you've been here.
Since you know that I've been here even longer than you, Zhao, why do you act so impudently towards me? Aren't you looking down on the Southern District too much?
Goshin laughed tenderly. He spoke to Zhao gently, as if he were speaking words of endearment. But even a fool could sense the callous, even murderous intent in his speech.
You're an antique, yes, but so what? I appreciate your ability, and so I invited you into my clan. You call that impudence?
Zhao suddenly smiled as well. This was my first time seeing her smile. The pale smile sat on her face, under two lifeless eyes, creating a ghastly image.
Well, whether or not I'd want to serve you depends on your ability.
As he spoke, Goshin suddenly formed a whirlwind of air. From the vortex, a streak of wind slashed at Zhao. Seemingly at the same time, the air around Zhao started to vibrate, and thin, frozen ice pellets appeared. I heard a hissing, like something was about to crack. When he felt the air around us change, Nizun grabbed me by the collar and pulled me back. Behind Goshin, Muscle Man and Bandages also retreated several steps. A dense thicket of air needles flew out from Goshin's whirlwind towards Zhao. My eyes could barely keep up. Zhao didn't try to dodge his attack. Instead, she seemed to have condensed the air needles headed for her, almost like a pool of water shattering. The condensed air popped apart and disappeared. My heart trembled inside me. The two of them were so strong that they could even control the way air flowed. Goshin remained still. When he saw that Zhao had neutralized his attack without having to move a step, he suddenly laughed deviously and pulled out the dark sword at his waist. Zhao's expression tensed. She turned to Muscle Man and commanded,
Tao Li, get him.
The muscular man called Tao Li immediately made a move. He extended his arms and grabbed Goshin, but Goshin didn't turn back but simply said,
Steady.
And Muscle Man suddenly stopped, frozen in place like a rock. Meanwhile, Goshin drew his long sword. Zhao glowered, and then the air around her started to contract again. I even felt my skin start to tighten. The scene was tense, in preparation for an attack that would happen at any moment, when suddenly the sound of a phone ringing echoed in the air. The unexpected sound of an incoming call suddenly floated out from Goshin's pocket. Everyone at the scene was stunned, and I felt like countless crows were flying past us. Goshin simply let go of his sword and shrugged. He pulled out the cell phone from his pocket.
Hello, Si Lu, what is it?
A strange expression crossed Zhao's face at the mention of Si Lu. I don't know what the person on the other end of the phone said, but Goshin responded,
Okay, then I'll head back.
After he put away his phone, his expression turned cold. He said to Zhao,
We will meet again, beautiful.
Without waiting for our reactions, he dashed off towards the district line. The sky had yet to light up, so as Goshin approached a bright glowing barrier. However, he didn't slow down. I tried to open my eyes wider to see what would happen, but the barrier was like a vast sheet of whiteness. In just 1 second, he'd already disappeared right before my eyes. After the district line flashed with light, it immediately returned to its ordinary, dark appearance, like nothing had happened. No way, no one can cross the district lines at night. I was shocked. Zhao also frowned. She continued to stare in the direction that Goshin disappeared in. Nizun suddenly whispered into my ear,
From this point on, don't say anything.
The feeling of Nizun's lips near my ear left me a bit uncomfortable. I shook off his hand that was still on my shoulder. Nizun's carefree voice suddenly sounded unhurriedly.
Zhao, the sky will light soon. Why don't we all return to our own bases? As for your dead clan members, if you're interested in investigating, you're welcome to the Western District anytime. The West hasn't been entirely calm recently either, and there have been a number of bizarre deaths. I hope that we can keep in touch, as I suspect our goals may be the same.
Zhao turned to Nizun. After a moment, she said to the muscular man,
Tao Li, Mulai, let's head back now.
So the bandaged man was called Molai. What a strange name. Then, Zhao and her men moved. As they passed by me, she turned to look at me. Her eyes still looked just as lifeless as before. I felt a chill down my spine. After Zhao left, I finally let out a breath. I tidied up my hair, and then pat my frightened heart.
So, you know that guy? Gao Xin?
Nizun asked me. I paused. After a moment, I turned my head and looked in the other direction. Then I started running, returning to the Western District. I finally said as I ran, No, I don't know him. Once we got back, I go straight to my room, and I get a milk to drink. Do you know someone named Gao Xin? I took a sip of milk and asked Yoji, who was sitting on my bed. You could eat and drink as much as you wanted here, and it wouldn't affect your body at all. That, at least, was one positive here.
Gao Xin? Who's that? I've never heard of him.
Yoji was currently combing through her green hair, with an annoyed look. I complained, "Go outside to comb, don't leave a pile of green hair on my bed." Yoji completely ignored me and continued combing.
Did something interesting happen while you were in the Eastern District?
It's better not to talk about it, but there is something I need you to check out.
What is it?
It seems that Laurel didn't die. Jipa said that someone had been disguised as her. A flash of surprise crossed Yoji's eyes.
Jipa, from the marketplace.
Which other one is there? I asked.
I'll go talk to him. If Laurel really didn't die, I'll find her as fast as I can.
Yuji got out to leave. But if you're heading downstairs, pass by the first floor and tell Old Man Fan to make a trip up here.
Got it.
Yoji nodded. When Fan knocked on the door, I called out, "Old man, grow your head back and then come in." I smiled happily to see Fan looking like an ordinary, friendly old man. Tears welled up in his eyes, and Fan raised a trembling hand, as if he were about to touch me. "What are you doing?" I asked with a face of disgust.
Ah Shen, I was very worried about you. They didn't hurt you in the Eastern District, did they?
Old man Fan sounded like he wanted to cry. "No, who would have hurt me? I'm still a district commander," I responded. "Grandpa, I want to ask you something. Do you know of someone named Gao Xin?" Fan started at the mention of the name, then he staggered over to a chair and sat down.
The Southern District's Gao Xin.
Fan asked seriously, his teary demeanor now gone. Grandpa Fan was rarely this serious, so I also grew solemn. "That's right, him. He seems pretty strong. We met him in the Eastern District today."
Although I've been in the split zone for a very long time, I don't know much about him. I have heard though, that his activities are rather unusual. And he only obeys the commands of the Southern District CLO. He doesn't even listen to Mr. Blonde. No one seems to know what his mental force amounts to. He's someone without a record, and he works in unpredictable ways. Sometimes he's good, sometimes bad. If you provoke him, he will torture you with extreme cruelty.
I nodded, as I thought this over. How did he end up appearing in the East? They say that he never leaves the Southern District. It seemed like Zhao was trying to recruit him. Old Man Fan looked at me with concern.
Ah Shen, I'll be frank with you. You should start properly training. Running away blindly serves no purpose. Since all these people are stuck here, they should at least be comfortable and safe. You have the responsibility to protect all the residents of this district, so you can't continue on this way.
I tilted my head slightly and touched the glass in my hand. Grandpa, what I don't get is why I have to protect them. What does their life or death have to do with me? Old Man Fan rationalized.
Because, if you do not defend, you will simply be attacked. That is the way of the real world. And this place is no different. Consider why Mr. Blonde chose you as a district commander. It's because he knew that you wouldn't leave everyone to die. There are many people here who don't care about living, but you're not one of them.
Why is living so tough everywhere? What's the point of it? I lifted my head and looked towards the window. Fan suddenly asked,
Have you ever thought about why soul splitters exist, or why they brought us here?
I shook my head. I've never understood it.
Perhaps these soul splitters exist for the purpose of telling us to cherish our lives. No one here had a meticulously clean record while they lived. Have you ever thought about why it's so difficult to find our soul splitters? If you were to find the reason for living, do you think that, perhaps, our soul splitter would just be brought to us by some work of fate?
I was a bit distracted as I considered what Fan was saying. After some time, I suddenly raised my head and smiled warmly at the old man. I understand, Grandpa. Don't worry, I'll protect all of you. I won't let what happened to Laurel happen in the Western District again. Grandpa Fan nodded. At the top of the residence, Nizan lied with his hands tucked behind his head. As he stared up at the sky, I rolled my eyes as I looked at his completely at ease attitude.
Miss me?
Nizan asked. What I'd like is for you to die. I scoffed and walked over to him. Then I lied down and rested my head on my arms as well.
The sky here really is pitch black.
He yawned. Nizan, Gao Xin looks just like the senior that I killed. I mentioned, then I closed my eyes. And there was just silence. After some time passed, Nizan's lazy tone sounded again.
this place has always been strange. Everything that appears seems normal, but you know, everything here is fake.
I kept my eyes closed. If you think everything is fake, then why don't you just wake up? I heard a soft laugh.
I said it's all fake, not that I'm dreaming. I don't know why we ended up in this place. What I do know is that we can go back. So, there's no need to be overly concerned about anything here.
In the darkness, I finally opened my eyes. You're so accepting of this situation, but I really don't get it. What is it about you that resembles my second identity? I have a hard time believing that someone as optimistic as you would somehow resonate with a demonic killer. He smiled.
Don't put it like that. That demonic killer is still a part of you. Moreover, someone like me is probably good at convincing others.
I often think that it might just be better if the two of us just die. I turned my head and looked at the side of Nizan's face. Even from the side, you could still see that calm, indifferent and carefree smile.
Then let's die together. But tonight isn't the night for it. Don't go talking about eternity, dying as you lived, loving without bounds. That kind of stuff, okay?
His voice was very clear. I couldn't help laughing. Then I closed my eyes and didn't speak anymore. An evening breeze blew past, and it felt very pleasant against my skin. A voice suddenly sounded behind us.
The two of you are in a good mood.
I opened my eyes and sat up. I turned back and saw Songlu and Yolang. Even though I don't have a large fan group like the S-Clan to protect me, as the Western commander, I do have several friends. At least, Songlu and Yolang probably count as my friends. They're a famous pair of lovers in the Western District. It's said that Songlu developed a mind-splitting disorder after being raped in the real world. After arriving here, she kept to herself and was uncommunicative for a long time. In the end, it was Yolang who finally pulled her out from the darkness. I really envied her relationship with Yolang. A few days ago, the two had gone to the Northern District to see Mr. Blonde, so that they could have a glimpse of their life in the real world. They finally returned today. I rushed over with excitement and hugged Songlu. She had a super hot body and a gorgeous head of curly hair that fell to her shoulders. I rubbed my face against hers.
You perverted girl, release my wife, immediately.
Yolang called out exasperatedly. I ignored him. Songlu lovingly pat my head.
I heard a lot happened while I was gone. Is everything okay?
Yeah, now that you two are back, there's nothing I'm scared of anymore. I let go of Songlu. Then, like a child, I spread my arms out and pretended to fly around the rooftop like a plane. Songlu sighed.
I heard from Old Man Fan, and I decided that I'm going to start training you tomorrow. While it's difficult to raise your mental force, it's not entirely impossible. You'll just have to work really hard. I can't let you get away with loafing around anymore.
Songlu smiled at me.
That's right. People in the Eastern District can manipulate the air around them, but she can fall off a building while she's running. What's up with that difference, right?
Nizan bantered. I rolled my eyes at him.
It happens that our trip to the Northern District was quite insightful. After talking to Mr. Blonde, we returned with some new methods of controlling mental force. It'll be helpful for training Arshan. Want to give it a try?
Yolang pointed at me as he spoke to Nizan. I couldn't help jumping in. Hey, you're treating me like a test subject now? I'm still a district commander. Okay, Yolang, just because your wife likes me more than you can't get revenge like this. Yolang smiled innocently.
Don't try to escape. We're not going to let you get out of this training.
I curled my lips and put on an expression like I wanted to cry. Then I wrapped my arms around Songlu. Songlu, my big sister, they're bullying me.
I agree with you, Lang, this time.
Songlu covered her mouth and laughed. Oh no, I'm done for. So, for the next week, I spent every day being trained by Songlu and Yolang. As for Nizan, he mostly lied around on the sidelines, looking like a spineless coward. After a week of non-stop training day and night, I was finally able to increase my mental force to 53, and now, I also don't have to use any mental force for ordinary jumping, combat, or running. That counted as a success. Well, I'm very satisfied. However, I hadn't learned any cool moves during the week of training. Still, it's true that not everyone could increase their mental force in a week at all. And considering that my mental force was much weaker than the other 2 district commanders to start with, this extra 1 level of mental force was just enough to allow me to expend some on my sexy appearance. The 2 of them helplessly shook their heads at me while I was trained like my life was on the line. I often saw a scene of the lazy Nizun, sleeping at the side like a dead pig,